In the heart of the city lived Claudine Williams, a woman whose blindness never defined her limits. Though her vision had faded years ago, her sense of independence and self-respect shone brighter than ever. With her white cane in hand, she walked the familiar streets each morning, navigating the rhythm of her neighborhood with confidence built from years of experience. To many, she was an example of resilience, proof that disability did not mean defeat. On one particular day, Claudine's steps carried her toward the market, where she often exchanged warm words with vendors who knew her by name. The sound of traffic, snippets of conversation, and the steady tap of her cane created the symphony of her everyday life. But the quiet assurance of her routine was shattered by a voice laced with disdain. "Move it, lady," barked an officer standing near the curb. His tone was not protective or helpful but edged with irritation. Claudine paused, tilting her head toward the direction of the sound. "Officer, I'm doing my best," she replied calmly, her voice carrying the dignity she always maintained in the face of challenge. Her measured response didn't soothe him. Instead, it seemed to inflame his arrogance. With a sneer audible even in his silence, he suddenly yanked the cane from her hand. Before Claudine could react, there was a sharp crack, the unmistakable sound of her lifeline snapping in two. Gasps rippled through those who witnessed it. To the bystanders, it was more than just a broken cane. It was a deliberate act of humiliation, stripping a blind woman of the tool that gave her independence. Some froze in shock, others looked away, unwilling to confront the uniformed man who had committed the act. Claudine stood still, her chest tightening, not from fear but from the sharp sting of being degraded so publicly. Her cane wasn't just wood and plastic. It was freedom. And in breaking it, the officer hadn't just taken away her mobility. He had tried to strip her of her dignity. The silence that followed was deafening. The officer muttered something under his breath about teaching her a lesson before stepping back, arms crossed, as though proud of his cruelty. Claudine's hands trembled, but her voice, steady and low, cut through the air. "You may have broken my cane," she said, "but you cannot break me." Among the crowd, a young man named James quietly raised his phone. Unlike the others who looked away, he hit record, capturing the officer's sneer, the snapped cane, and Claudine's unwavering composure. He didn't know then how important his decision would be, only that his conscience refused silence. What neither the officer nor the crowd realized was that this moment, this careless act of cruelty, would soon echo far beyond the street corner. Because Claudine Williams was not only a woman of strength. She was also the mother of someone who held real power in the city. And her humiliation was about to set in motion a reckoning. The officer tossed the broken pieces of the cane onto the pavement as if it were nothing more than trash. Claudine bent slowly, her hands trembling as she searched for the fragments. Each touch of the splintered edges deepened the ache in her chest. It wasn't just wood in her palms. It was years of self-reliance, confidence, and dignity, fractured by a single act of malice. Around her, the crowd shifted uneasily. Some stared, others whispered, but no one intervened. Fear of authority kept their voices locked behind closed lips. They had seen what happened to those who challenged men in uniform. They knew the risks. Still, the silence felt heavier than the summer air. Claudine could sense it, the weight of onlookers watching but choosing not to help. But not everyone remained still. James, the young man with the phone, continued recording. His heart raced, anger burning in his chest as he documented every sneer, every dismissive shrug of the officer. He knew what he was capturing wasn't just cruelty, it was injustice laid bare. Claudine stood slowly, straightening her shoulders despite the hollow feeling in her stomach. She refused to let the officer see her crumble. "You have your uniform," she said firmly, "but I have my pride, and that is something you cannot take." Her words were not shouted, but the strength in them carried further than any raised voice could have. The officer scoffed, clearly unmoved, and turned his attention elsewhere as if the matter were closed. But the onlookers, though silent, carried her words with them. For some guilt seeped in. They would go home that night, replaying the scene in their minds, wondering why they hadn't spoken up. James, however, didn't let guilt paralyze him. He posted the video online within the hour, captioning it simply, "Blind woman's cane broken by cop. This is who protects our streets." It spread like wildfire. Within minutes, comments poured in outrage, heartbreak, anger. The video wasn't just footage. It was a mirror forcing the community to confront its own silence. By nightfall, local news stations had picked it up. The officer's sneer, the audible snap of the cane, and Claudine's unwavering composure played on repeat across screens. Strangers who had never met her spoke her name with respect. She was no longer just a woman at a street corner. She was a symbol of resilience against cruelty. And yet, as the storm of attention gathered, Claudine sat quietly in her modest living room. The pieces of her cane rested on the table, wrapped neatly in a cloth. She traced the edges with her fingers, her mind steady. For her, this wasn't about headlines. It was about justice and dignity. The officer didn't know it yet, but the ripple he had caused was only beginning to spread. Claudine's humiliation had awakened something far larger than a viral video. It had set the stage for someone with far more authority to step forward. Someone who called her mother. The next morning, the city awoke to outrage. The video of Claudine's broken cane had flooded social media, dominating timelines, news cycles, and community forums. Across the city, people debated not only the officer's cruelty but also the silent complicity of those who had stood by. But while the public fumed, one man watched the footage with a heart heavier than most. That man was Malik Williams, Claudine's son. What the officer hadn't realized, what the world would soon discover, was that Malik was no ordinary citizen. He was the newly appointed deputy police chief, a man whose career had been built on fairness, reform, and service. And the woman humiliated on that street corner wasn't just any blind black woman. She was his mother. When Malik saw the sneer on the officer's face and the crack of the cane echo through his phone, his jaw tightened. Anger burned in his chest, but it wasn't the kind that clouded judgment. It was the kind that fueled resolve. He knew immediately that this could not be buried, ignored, or excused. By midday, Malik held a press conference outside police headquarters. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, the broken pieces of his mother's cane resting in his hand like evidence of a crime. His voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of a son and a leader. "Yesterday," he began, "an officer sworn to protect our citizens committed an act of cruelty against one of the most vulnerable members of our community. That woman was not only a citizen of this city. She is my mother. And let me be clear, justice will not bend for a badge." Gasps rippled through the reporters as the connection clicked. The blind woman from the viral video wasn't just a symbol. She was directly tied to the man second in command of the entire police force. Malik continued, his tone unwavering. Being blind did not make her weak. Being black did not make her less deserving of respect. And being a police officer does not grant anyone the right to abuse their power. This department will not tolerate it. Not from rookies, not from veterans. Accountability begins today. The statement reverberated through the city. Community leaders who had long demanded reform felt hope surge in their chests. For once, power wasn't circling the wagons to protect its own. Instead, it was standing beside the people it was meant to serve. Meanwhile, in living rooms, coffee shops, and buses across the city, people replayed Malik's words. James, the young man who had recorded the video, felt vindicated. His small act of courage had helped ignite a movement. Grace, the woman who had hesitated to speak up at the scene, now resolved that she would never stand silent again. And Claudine, though still shaken, felt pride swell within her. Her son had not just defended her. He had stood up for every person who had ever felt small under the weight of injustice. The officer who had broken her cane now faced suspension, an internal investigation, and the public's wrath. But for Malik, this wasn't about punishment, it was about change. And the city was watching to see if his promise would become reality. The following week, the police review board convened in a packed chamber. Community members filled the seats, their faces a mixture of anger, hope, and anticipation. Cameras lined the back wall, ensuring every word spoken would reach the city beyond. At the center of it all sat the officer, his once confident demeanor now replaced with unease. Claudine was there too, guided by Malik's steady arm. Though her cane had been broken, she walked with her head high, refusing to appear as a victim. Her presence alone was powerful, proof that dignity could not be destroyed by cruelty. The hearing began with the board reviewing the viral footage. The room grew silent as the sound of the cane snapping echoed through the speakers. Gasps and murmurs spread among those who hadn't yet seen it firsthand. Then came Claudine's calm but unshakable voice. "You may have broken my cane, but you cannot break me." The words, replayed for all to hear, struck deeper than any prosecutor's argument ever could. When it was her turn to speak, Claudine didn't rant or rage. Instead, she told her story with the same grace she had carried that day on the street corner. She spoke of independence, of how her cane was more than a stick. It was her freedom, her autonomy, her dignity. And she spoke of the pain of being treated as less than human by someone meant to protect her. Her testimony moved many to tears, but it was Malik's closing statement that sealed the moment. Standing tall in his uniform, he addressed the board and the public alike. "This is not just about my mother. This is about every person who has felt powerless against those sworn to protect them. If we allow acts like this to go unpunished, we betray the very oath we swore. Justice must not only be promised, it must be proven." The decision was unanimous. The officer was stripped of his badge, his dismissal a clear message that cruelty had no place behind the shield. Outside the chamber, the crowd erupted in applause. Strangers approached Claudine, thanking her for her strength, for her refusal to be silenced. James, the young man who had filmed everything, was invited to stand beside Malik as he addressed the press. His small act of courage now recognized as the spark that lit the fire. In the days that followed, Claudine received a new cane, this one gifted by her son. But it wasn't just a replacement. Its handle was engraved with a single word, unbreakable. She carried it proudly, each tap on the pavement a reminder that while cruelty could shatter wood, it could never shatter her spirit. The city, too, carried forward a new resolve. The incident had become more than a scandal, it was a turning point. Training programs were revised, accountability measures strengthened, and community voices given greater weight. For Claudine, the lesson was simple yet profound. Injustice could wound, but dignity, when held firm, had the power to transform even the darkest moments into catalysts for change. And for the officer who once believed breaking a cane was a show of strength, the truth was undeniable. Real strength had always belonged to the woman he tried and failed to break.